All right, folks, welcome to the Strong for Life podcast. This week, I'm joined by Dave O Brien, and myself and Dave first crossed paths back in 2016. I interned with Dave at his gym at the time, Fifth Element Wellness, and then I was doing a retreat in Montenegro about a month ago, and Dave was like, "Oh, I live in Montenegro now. We should catch up." So I had no idea how this Melbourne to Montenegro trip started and how he's ended up there. So I think this is a really good place to start, mate, is like, how did this whole process start from you being in Melbourne, very much settled, it seemed, to now being in Montenegro, pretty close to me. I'm in Romania.
Yeah, well, obviously, like, I just want to say it's an honor to be on your podcast. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, man.
There's a lot of information in that question. So, you're right. Okay. Obviously, like I had a holistic based gym in Melbourne. And I would say at the time we opened that, it probably would have been I believe, okay, unless someone corrects me on this, okay, I actually would say it was probably the first holistic based gym in the world, actually.
Oh,
Obviously, like now, pretty much every gym facility has got an ice bath and a far infrared sauna. So a lot of the things that we actually had at Fifth, okay, are pretty staple nowadays. Okay, but back then it was, completely left of field. And so, I actually had Fifth. I actually put my house on the line when it came to Fifth, and put everything I owned on the line when it came to Fifth. And around about the time when COVID sort of erupted, I had Fifth. I think I had Fifth all up for about 7.5 years. It was like my baby. You probably know that. Okay, it came out of my head. And even like the logo, I don't know if you know this, I even designed the logo.
I didn't
Okay,
know
even
that.
even the actual design of the gym. Okay, all that came out of my head. And so during that period of time when COVID erupted, I would say that like a lot of businesses, we might have had some cultural sort of like issues within the business. Obviously those things can happen. There can be ebbs and flows, and probably having those issues and then going into COVID, it wasn't the best timing. And literally, I think at the time we had like 26 staff. Look, I might be wrong on that, but we had a lot of staff, and because our business was really face to face, literally we couldn't really operate. But I could operate. A lot of my business was actually online, okay, where I was actually doing, looking at people's biomarkers and blood chemistry. And obviously a big part of my business was gut health. So I could still operate. And, business was actually pretty good over that period of time for myself. Okay. But, one of the issues was that I had to try and keep the gym afloat. And I had plenty of time during that period of time. Like, gyms were actually closed down in Melbourne for like 320 days. Okay.
Yeah.
Like obviously close to a year. Yeah. Okay. It's like crazy. And during that period of time, I guess I had, because I was sort of like by myself. Okay. A lot of other people were operating from home and, spending more time with their family, which is great. Okay. I wasn't. I was actually spending less time with my family. And I guess kind of that I had time to think about, is this really what I want to do? Don't get me wrong, I was really proud of what I created with Fifth. Okay. I would say we're probably one of the first gyms also to look at like blood chemistry and focus on aspects around gut health. And there was a huge education focus as well. And that's why we were running like internships. And as you know, I was running a lot of seminars, and some of them were like blood chemistry interpretation seminars. And so I was really proud of obviously what we created, but I felt like maybe I was spread a little bit too thin. And always my dream with Fifth was I think initially the dream is always just to open more, Fifth elements. Okay. And, maybe potentially franchise it and replicate it. And I wanted to create a whole heap of like mini me's basically. Yeah. Okay. And I remember like at one stage I was doing like mentoring with like every single trainer in the facility. I would invest a lot into education with the guys, which I don't regret at all. Okay, because I think it helped me to sharpen my sword like even more. I operated a whiteboard. I don't know if you remember that. Like
Oh,
everything I just write
100%.
on a whiteboard
Yeah.
just come out of
Yeah.
my head. But I feel really blessed to have actually had the time to do that. Okay, because me writing on a whiteboard, okay, it's just embedded in my brain. Okay, a lot of people listen to me talk and they go, "Oh my God, how can you regurgitate all this information?" Well, that's how. Okay, there's actually like I don't know if you ever read a book called The Art of Learning. Okay,
Was it
where
Josh
they talk about the
mention? And we were just kind of, that's where we,
yeah, I was talking about like a book that I read. Okay, it was actually called The Art of Learning. Okay, where they sort of talk about the science of learning. Okay, and within that, yeah, okay, they say one of the best ways to retain information. I think we actually might retain information like 40% of the information, okay, through handwriting. And I did that for a long period of time at Fifth Element. Okay, I just literally wrote every single thing on a whiteboard. Okay, and that's probably why I'm able to regurgitate, very complex information. Okay, around like blood markers and biomarkers and gut health. Okay, so I don't like obviously that that time at Fifth. Okay, Fifth was a little bit like my lab. Yeah, okay. Like it enabled me to look at all these, trends and correlations with blood markers and, really dive into the deepest aspects of how the gut functions. And I did that for a long period of time and I went pretty far down the rabbit hole. I'd say, probably into the black hole and I never came back out. Okay. And so, Fifth allowed me to create a lot of these things that I'm very proud of today in terms of I've got a blood software that I've created. It's got all the trends and the correlations in there. Some of the things that I talk about with the gut health, which is all about like restoration of your natural defense mechanisms within the gut lining. That's to do with like Paneth cells, okay, antimicrobial peptides, intestinal stem cells or ISCs, which is your ability to replenish and rejuvenate the gut lining. We're talking about tissue homeostasis, like all these things I'm talking about. No one taught me that. No one taught me that. Yeah, okay. That's stuff that I had the time within Fifth Element, okay, to start to really dive into that, okay, which I did. Yeah, okay. And then it probably just got to a point, and I had that realization during COVID that if I'm going to open more facilities, okay, is that just going to spread me even thinner? And I would say the answer to that probably would have been yes. And so maybe it was a blessing in disguise, even though it's, Fifth Element was my first baby. Okay. It was very hard to let go of that and then pass it on to someone else, who's probably going to put their stamp on it. Okay. But I realized that's what I had to do. If I really wanted to create some of the things that, I've been able to create now, a lot of the time you got to step away from it. And I think COVID allowed me to do that. Which I can do that. And then I thought, okay, what do I want to do? Yeah, okay. Obviously, I pivoted a lot of my business online, okay, which is easy for me because I'm doing consultation work. And I probably went more into, providing people with like gut health journeys. Okay, obviously, blood interpretation where people are doing, but I'm looking at all aspects. Okay, like I provide training. Okay, but most of that training is really based on the gastrointestinal issues they've got and their health issues. And obviously looking at their nutrition, I mapped that out for them. Okay, so I pivoted everything online, and all my stuff is consultation work, and as I said, journeys, and also I had space to start to look at creating supplements and compounds that I would really know that would really work when it comes to some of these gastrointestinal issues. And now I have a business partner with that, Luke Weston. Okay, and that supplement company is called the Collective Supplement Co, where we're looking at like things like peptides, which are just chains of amino acids. But we've got blends like BPC157, lactoferrin, and GHKCU, which is the copper peptide with PEA. But I did notice that a lot of people don't do the Dave O Brien blend. I never actually wanted to go into the space of supplements because I didn't want people to think that I was pushing supplements. Okay. But I would say one of the biggest hurdles for my clients would be the cost of supplements and the fact that they have to get so many different compounds from so many different supplement companies because ultimately no one does the blends that I'm talking about. Okay. But I think, having that space to actually create certain blends that are going to streamline the process for my clients was necessary. And then I looked at, well, if I'm operating online, I might as well look at, okay, are there certain places around the world where maybe we could minimize our tax, where the cost of living is cheaper, where it might be the way, like maybe lifestyle factors in terms of they might be allow a little bit more freedom. And so then I started to look at that aspect. Okay, like, one person I spoke to was one of my close colleagues and someone I really look up to. I know you've had him on the podcast, and I know you're obviously very close with him as well, is Keegan Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd already been diving into, acquiring, residencies and citizenships in like, other countries around the world. And so I started to look into it, and even like listening to people like Andrew Henderson from like Nomad Capitalists. Okay, it made me start looking at things like citizenship as like another commodity, basically. And if we're dealing with things like inflation and cost of living crisis, okay, then you can minimize those things by being in countries where, yes, they're being affected by inflation and cost of living as well. Okay, but coming from a Western country, okay, it might not impact, myself and my family as much. There's probably a lot more in it than that, okay, but that's, I'm trying to summarize it.
Yeah, there's so many different rabbit holes to go down there, man. The first one is I've had quite a few guys on the podcast over the last year, and it's interesting. They all said the same thing. Like the thing that they built, which they were proud of, it got too big, and then they got actually trapped in it. So it sounds like you avoided that really because you were saying that, well, the next step is to grow even more, which means I'm going to be even less time with family and the big picture things that are important to you, I'm guessing.
Mm.
So what was that process like when you were like having to let go of this, very special gym idea that you built, and then you were very much going into unknown because like where you are now, like it was very unclear that you'd be in this position now, 4 years ago. So what was that like process? You were talking to people like Keegan, like what else was going on, and were you close to just staying in Melbourne? I'd like to hear more about that.
Mm. Look, I'm not going to lie. It was extremely hard for me, like extremely hard, because I mean, you only had a snapshot into being at Fifth Element. I mean, I feel like you were there sort of on and off. Okay,
Yep.
you'd come in and out, but yeah, it literally was my baby, my first baby. That whole concept came out of my head. I mean, that's not me taking away from the involvement of Matt. Okay, but Matt was more operations. It's just factual. Okay, when it comes to the aspects of like understanding like blood interpretation and strength and conditioning and nutrition. Okay, that was my thing. Okay, I don't claim to be like a genius when it comes to operations and financial because it's just not my passion. Yeah. Okay. But that side of things was my passion. Yeah. Okay. And I actually had that thought process of creating like a holistic based gym where people would come and get their bloods checked. Okay. And then like their training would be based on their bloods. Yeah. Okay. There would be like, if they did have gut issues, okay, then there would be a program set out to rectify those gut issues. Yeah, okay. There would be programs set out to obviously rectify the health issues that they were dealing with. Yeah, okay. It's like, yes, I'd like to say a one-stop shop. I guess it was a little bit like that. Okay, where literally, okay, if on their protocol was cold therapy, okay, they had the ability to do cold immersion and cold therapy on site, okay? If it was like far infrared saunas, for whatever reason that might be, okay, maybe they had like protein misfolding issues, like, multiple sclerosis, okay, then that would be within their protocol and they could do like far infrared heat or far infrared saunas, okay? It was more restorative things like yin yoga. We had yin yoga, yeah, okay? And if they needed to like minimize central fatigue, maybe they need to go for like, training methods, which don't have a lot of eccentric loading and deceleration forces and acceleration forces. That's why we had like strongman training, okay? So that really came out of my head, yeah, okay? I remember I actually had a conversation with Charles Poliquin, who, I guess Charles is quite a polarizing figure, okay? And, I think some people can love him and some people can hate him. But, I think I've got so much gratitude for my time that I spent with Charles. I wouldn't say that I agree with everything that Charles taught me, okay? But you don't have to agree with everything that you are taught by a mentor, okay? And you might actually find over time, okay, that, actually, that probably wasn't true and I'm going to expand on that and I'm going to improve that. But it doesn't mean that I'm not grateful for every single thing that he taught me. I would say Charles really, he actually helped me to have the motivation to sort of follow that dream. Yeah, okay. Because I remember I actually did like a biosignature. I think I did like biosignature, like, close to like, 5 times, might have been even more with Charles. Okay. And I remember that.
Dave, just to jump in, the biosignature, is that the neurotransmitter based on what comes up with that? And then
Well, that's where they would like obviously do like skin fold measurements, okay? And then they would say those skin fold measurements could be a reflection of, particular like hormonal imbalances and might have been circadian rhythm issues. Okay, that's what it was really based on. But like I remember like the initial like biosignature, okay, that went for about 5 days. Over time they condensed it and it became more about the protocols, okay. But the first one that I did went for 5 days. I've still got the notebook, okay, from that 5 days of biosignature. Okay, it's literally I filled out every single page in that notebook. Okay, and Charles was just talking about things. I thought I was pretty good when it came to strength and conditioning, and I thought maybe a bit too cocky. I thought my knowledge was pretty good. Okay, I remember the first day that I sat down and did the biosignature. I literally sat there and thought to myself, I know nothing. I know nothing.
How many years were you coaching at that point?
Sorry?
How many years into coaching were you at that point?
I think roughly it's a long time ago now. Okay, it probably would have been about 5-6 years into coaching. Yeah. Okay. So you do go through phases where you think you know it all. Yeah. Okay. And that at that point I realized, oh my God, I know nothing. And I remember I was lucky enough to actually have 15 minutes to actually sit down and talk to Charles. And I talked about this concept, based gym, okay, where people, and I told him what I was thinking about, where people would come in, they'd get their blood checked, and we would look at things like their gut health, yeah, okay. And he said, it's an amazing concept. And he said, the only advice I can give you, and I remember this I remember this still today, okay. He said, the only advice I can really give you is everything I'm going to teach you, okay, in this biosignature seminar means absolutely nothing, okay, if you don't go away and research it even more than I have. And I literally took that and I ran with it. And I would like to think today that if I could meet up with Charles again, he would say, yeah, you did it. Okay, you took that bit of information, you took that statement and you applied it. I think in many ways, yeah, okay, I still haven't come back up for air. Yeah, okay, I'm still down the rabbit hole. I'm constantly, people wouldn't know this, I'm constantly looking at research, constantly. Any downtime that I have, Okay. Some people might work on social media. Some people might work on videos. Okay. I look at research. That's what I do. Okay. Because I really feel, okay, that the best thing I can give back to the world, okay, is to hopefully give solutions to help people optimize their well-being in their life. Okay, and I really feel like I'm prepared to make that sacrifice. Okay, and unfortunately, that sacrifice is, sometimes come at a cost to my time with my family. Okay, once again, people aren't going to see that. Okay, sometimes at a cost to my relationship. But I'm pretty clear on what my purpose is, Connor. I'm pretty clear with that. And so you can imagine, okay, if your first step towards that is to create a facility, okay, that can change even the way we look at education when it came to like personal trainers and strength and conditioning, and a one-stop shop where people would come and just go, oh my God, I'm doing ice baths and I'm doing far infrared saunas. And you create that, it comes to life. And I think for a period of time, me personally, we might have been considered one of the best facilities, okay, going around. Yeah. I can't say for sure. But I think we had a pretty good reputation and I was very proud of. And then it gets to a point where you realize you have to let go of that. And it creates a lot of conflict. Okay. I remember the conversation I actually had to have with the team at the time. And, like some people think, especially when I'm talking about what I'm passionate about, okay, it might even come across that I'm even a little bit on the spectrum. Yeah, okay. Well, I've actually had people go like, have you got Asperger's? Okay, I go, look, it seems like that, okay, but trust me, I'm actually quite an emotional being, okay, so I'm pretty sure I don't have Asperger's. I don't think I'm on the spectrum, okay, but it can actually come across that I'm quite robotic, yeah, okay. And I just remember that when I actually had to tell the team that I was actually stepping aside from Fifth Element, I literally just burst out crying. And that's what that meant to me. Okay. And to step away from something that is ultimately a part of you, and has come out of your brain, and that people don't realize the amount of work that you put into that. They don't see the sleepless nights. They don't see the, once again, the amount of time I invested into education with the team. Like I know for a fact, okay, there was no other facility worldwide that was actually investing the amount of education, okay, with their staff as we were educating at that time. Okay, like I would do a 3-hour education, okay, where we're doing 1 hour theory and like 2 hours of practical. And I think you experienced that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man. I was just gonna
Yeah.
say, like for people listening, it's so unheard of in the fitness industry. You're like the normal, in case people don't understand, like a normal gym is like pay us rent, and we don't care what you do as long as you give us the rent each week. And
Mm.
then people just churn and burn. So it was very amazing what you guys were doing because it just was helping people build careers of being very like high level, knowledgeable coaches.
Yeah, and then when you're investing so much into it, okay, like literally, maybe people might disagree with me, and that's fine. I know what I put into that place. And it was literally, there's nothing else I could have given. And when you know that, and then you realize it's time to step away, it's hard to let go. So I'm not going to lie, it was tough. There was many instances where I thought about hanging on to it. But looking back on it now, I realized that it would have actually got in the way of a lot of the things that I've created now. And guess what? Would I have had the space to, now I would say I'm researching more things than I've ever researched before. And I don't think I really would have had the space to have done that, okay, if I still had Fifth Element.
Yeah. You were saying so like 7.5 years,
I don't
just
know if that
so.
fully answers your question, but anyway,
No, it
that's my
does.
spiel. Yeah.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
I want to dive into patterns. So 7.5 years, hundreds upon hundreds of clients, of blood work analysis, of interviews. What are some for people listening that you're like, yeah, like the kind of the regular person who's pretty stressed, probably not moving enough. What are the common things you kept on seeing repeatedly and kept on see working really well for that kind of population?
It's a good question. Um, look, I think everyone in this industry has a bias. Okay. I think the worst position to be in is when you don't think you have a bias. Yeah. Okay. Like you have to have a realization that you do have a bias. Awareness is the first step. Okay. And so why I'm going down this path, okay, because do I have a bias? Well, I do have a bias. Okay. And my bias would be gut health. Okay. I would generally say that I think that is one of the missing pieces from what I see with blood work for a higher majority of individuals. Okay. And I could actually link most health complications to gastrointestinal problems. And I could literally bore people to tears with the science and even what the literature says around that. Okay. But you got other people who preach like the answer to everything is a calorie deficit. Okay.
Mm.
And that's their bias. Okay. And so I'm aware that me saying that the missing piece for a lot of individuals is gut health, there is a bias to that as well. Yeah. Okay. And I don't want to say that if everyone fixes their gut health, okay, that every single problem they've got, okay, is going to be fixed. Okay. But me personally, what I see within blood markers more than not relates to some sort of dysbiosis, some sort of like, damage to the gut lining, some type of, bacterial complication, bacterial metabolites, bacterial byproducts. And my thing would be, it's going to be very, very hard to rectify your issues, okay, if you don't rectify what's going on within that region first. Okay. So let me give you just one example here, because I obviously could give you many. Yeah. Okay. But let's use the example of testosterone. I think it's really relevant. Okay. So a lot of people going down this path with testosterone, okay, is that let's use compounds just to try and boost up testosterone. So people talk about things like Tonkat Ali, and maybe they talk about, Fedosia agrestis. Okay. So we're looking at compounds to try and, boost up the testosterone levels. Okay. Now we know that testosterone levels are a huge problem for men. I'm sure you've actually talked about this yourself. Yeah. Okay. We know that if we look at within the bloods, okay, where we've got serum testosterone, which is like total testosterone, which is like bound testosterone. And then we've got free testosterone, which is the testosterone that you have available within the bloodstream. Okay. Free testosterone levels, okay, let's say in the 1950s, roughly, okay, the average was about 700. Okay. Now the top of the reference range, okay, and this would be the metrics that they use in countries like the UK, Australia, New Zealand, okay, Canada, okay. So I'm not saying it's the exact same metrics that they would use in the US, okay, but the top of the reference range, okay, in the medical, which we're talking about medical, what they say is normal ranges, which is really based on averages, okay, is 670. That's the top of the reference range.
Wow.
Okay. So the top of the reference range is lower than what the average was in the 1950s. Okay. Where I would literally want like a male sitting probably around about 900, getting up towards about 1,000. Okay. Now they say that maybe today that the average is sitting at about 400. In a lot of men that I deal with, okay, they can be as low as like 150, 200. It's like rock bottom, okay? And as you know, Connor, okay, we can focus on the superficial things, can't we? Okay, which can be like, okay, we're talking about muscle mass and bone density, okay, libido, okay, aspects around fertility and all that type of stuff. But basically, in a nutshell, testosterone for men is in charge of emotional health.
Mm.
Okay, so we are going to be more prone to depression. There's going to be more suicidal tendencies. Yeah, okay. And also it actually helps with our ability to handle stress. Yeah, okay. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because a lot of time our focus is like, we're going to use, testosterone. Okay, so we're going to use testosterone replacement therapy, TRT. Okay, or we're going to use Tonkat Ali, or we're going to use something to try and boost up your testosterone. Okay, well, do you know, okay, that certain types of bacterial strains are really important for testosterone? Okay, so you need Doria, you need Megamonas, you need Rhumnococcus, you need Acinetobacter. Okay, now also there's a collective of bacteria that there's a lot we don't know about this collective of bacteria, okay, but it's called the endobolum. Okay, and actually one of the roles of this collective of bacteria is to basically regulate androgen hormones. So what we're talking about here is male hormones. Okay, now also the role of the endobolum is to actually help to metabolize EDCs. Okay, so these are called endocrine disrupting chemicals. Okay, and they can be things like microplastics and nanoparticles and heavy metals. Okay, because all these things obviously mimic estrogen. Okay, and that's going to cause complications around testosterone levels. Okay, but then we're focusing on like liver detoxification and cleansing. Okay, but we're not actually focusing on the microbiome. Okay, so if you look at cytochrome P450 enzymes, which are like liver enzymes, okay, within humans you've got about 57. Okay, but on the surface of bacteria you've got 3,000. Yeah. Okay. So when it comes to like detoxification and clearance, okay, the gut is a key player. Okay, and also if someone's got like let's say certain types of bacterial complications, okay, there's like negative gram bacteria or proteobacteria. Okay, LPS, which is the outer membrane of like negative gram bacteria. And unfortunately, a lot of people can have like LPS issues. Okay, we're talking about lipopolysaccharides. Okay, which is fatty acid molecules and long chain carbohydrate molecules like polysaccharides and monosaccharides. Okay, so if a guy has actually got like negative gram bacteria issues, okay, and there's high amounts of LPS, okay, in a nutshell, okay, LPS can create cell death in the Leydig cells in your testicles. Okay, and so what do you think that's going to do to your testosterone levels? So my point, okay, is what are you doing to address that? And more than not, the answer is what? Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how can you really correct what's going on with your testosterone levels if you're not looking at that? And that would be I'm only giving you one example there. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I remember when I was doing the internship in fifth. This is what came across, and I'd like you to explain this a bit more in that you might be deficient in something, but just giving like vitamin D or whatever, like just supplementing with that thing, it mightn't actually help to bring up the levels because there's so many other things going on underneath that need to be fixed as well.
Well,
Is that?
essentially, what you might be doing, okay, is like imagine you've got a leaky boat. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so the analogy of just like, and I'm not against this, okay, maybe initially to help the person to feel better, okay, it might be a requirement, okay, just to get them more on a level kill. Does that make sense? Okay. But the analogy would be, okay, if you're just going, well, I'm low in vitamin A, so I'm going to take a retinol, so I'm going to take a vitamin A. Okay, I'm low in B vitamins, so I'm just going to take B vitamins. Okay, it's a little bit like, the boat is leaking. The only way you're going to try and fix that is just by bailing out the water. Okay, that like, once again, okay, there's a lot in this. Okay, but let me just give you like an example. Okay, well, if you've got like, let's say, negative gram bacteria issues, I talked about that. Okay, well, you're going to struggle with fat soluble vitamins. So you're going to struggle with vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K. You're going to struggle with zinc. Okay, if you've got SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, okay, which really when people say they've got IBS, okay, which is irritable bowel syndrome, okay, and you can have different types of IBS, but really, okay, they say you've got like IBS-D, the D stands for diarrhea, okay, so you just got loose stools, okay, but with SIBO, okay, you get all these different types of gases, and you can get hydrogen ions, and hydrogen ions stimulate these receptors in your gut called TRPV1 receptors, and it creates vascular relaxation, so you get gastric dumping, so you get diarrhea. Okay, then you got IBS-C, which is constipation. Okay, but once again, one of the gases that you get with SIBO, it can be that you've got high amounts of methanobacterium or methane-producing bacteria like archaebacteria. Okay, and methane slows the transit time of food down by 59%. So then you get constipated. Okay. And sometimes the gases can be swinging, and that's why you can have what's called IBS-M, which is mixed. So you've got diarrhea and constipation. Then you've got IBS-U, which is unidentified, which basically means they don't know what you've really got. Okay. But all those things aren't really a diagnosis. Okay. So about 70 to 80% of all IBS symptoms would really be something like SIBO, roughly. Yeah. Okay. So if you got SIBO, okay, guess what? You also struggle with fat soluble vitamins. So you struggle with vitamin A, you struggle with vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K, you struggle with zinc. You see what I'm getting at here? Okay, you could have Helicobacter H. pylori, which from my perspective is not the devil. Okay, because a lot of time our answer to these complications, okay, is to say, well, just eradicate. Okay, but that's not fixing the reason to why you got that complication in the first place. And that's one of my issues. Yeah, okay. But if you've got Helicobacter H. pylori, which once again, okay, can be part of a normal ecology, so we don't demonize it. Okay, even Helicobacter, okay, a lack of it can be linked to even things like a demyelinating disease, which is like MS, multiple sclerosis. Okay, like having a lack of it, especially in children, can be linked to things like allergies, like hay fever, even respiratory problems like asthma. Okay, but if you had like an overgrowth, okay, of Helicobacter and H. pylori, you can have issues around vitamin A, vitamin E. You can have issues with like protein synthesis. So you struggle with protein maldigestion, protein malabsorption. So now you've got issues around amino acids. You can have issues around zinc, vitamin C, B9, which is folate, B12, cobalamin, okay, and iron. Now imagine, okay, because from my experience, most people don't just have one bacterial complication. The most common scenario is that people have a lot of co-infection, which is like multi-layered bacterial issues. So if you've got multi-layered bacterial issues, how many micronutrient deficiencies can that potentially create? And we haven't even covered aspects around candida and yeast, okay, where you're going to struggle with omega-3 fatty acids, struggle with magnesium, okay? There's a lot of ones. I'm only giving you some examples, okay? So we can use all these micronutrients to try, once again, okay, the analogy of trying to bail out a leaky boat. But ultimately, what you've got to fix is you've got to fix the complications that are actually taking place within the gastrointestinal tract. Okay. And that's going to allow you to be able to assimilate, okay, absorb food properly, where you're going to be able to maximize, okay, the the micronutrients, okay, and the even the macronutrients that you're getting from your food.
One thing I like to really look at is like, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this. So like, when you zoom out a lot of the time and do the really fundamentals, it fixes a lot of issues. So an example that I see with clients and myself as well is like a big issue now for people is just kind of stress across the board. So what we're doing with clients is doing activities without being plugged in. So like, don't be using your headphones as an example, because like for me, I'm constantly plugged in all the time if I'm not consciously not doing that. And then also just trying to reduce overall stress. So I had a lot of gut issues when I was with you guys in 2016. I think I had blastohominus. I think that's what it's called.
Blastocystis hominis, which is a protozoa parasite, it's a parasitic infection. Okay, that mainly resides in your small intestine, but it can be in the large intestine as well, but mainly a small intestine.
So I was in Asia for 2 years. I was just pretty wrecked, like when I got to Australia. But then also in hindsight, I was so stressed in Melbourne because it's just a stressful place. I was, on a temporary visa. I was self-employed, and all of that's kind of disappeared now in the last 2 years. So like, what sort of big picture stuff can people do? Maybe it's not like specifically looking at the supplementation, but they're like, okay, these are the big rocks that they are going to improve your gut microbiome and all these things. Do you have any insights around that area, like that kind of broad spectrum application?
Yeah. It seems like a simple question, but there's a lot of complexity in that. Yeah. Okay. Because, all right. I mean, there's no doubt, okay, if you're highly stressed, okay, I would say a lot of our problems start in the brain. Okay, there's no doubt about that. Okay, and that could be the combination of like childhood traumas and negative emotions. It could be financial stresses. Okay, whatever that might be. Okay, and then I would generally say the area that bears the brunt of that is the gastrointestinal tract. And so then we start to get like gastrointestinal issues, okay? And the problem there, okay, is once you start to get the gastrointestinal issues, is that is going to further impact the brain. Okay. And then you're sort of stuck in this loop. Okay. The big thing that I talk about is a lot of time people just getting stuck in these loops. Okay. And they just don't know how to get out of the loop. So yes, I would say a good place to start, okay, is like, you would say like low hanging fruit, okay, is to try to, focus on things like metacognition and meditation, okay, to minimize your stress load. Yeah. Okay. Yes, clean up your food. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. Move more. Okay. Get into nature. Okay. Like, I'm huge on people getting into nature. I mean, there's nothing more healing on the body, okay, than getting into nature. Okay. You get like more negative ions. Okay. A lot of the things that actually go in the body are more positively charged, like positive ions. Okay. But you get a huge exposure to negative ions. They actually did like research on mice, okay, where they actually created an environment where they actually took out all the negative ions, okay, out of that environment. I think it was like a box, yeah, okay. And they actually showed that actually sped up like the aging process, okay. They were more prone to, certain diseases, yeah, okay. So that was just not being exposed to like negative ions. Okay. Now we know things like, waterfalls. Okay. Like mountain waterfalls are definitely the highest amount of like negative ions. Okay. Second best would be like the ocean. Okay. But even if you get the combination of like, a waterfall with like, pine trees and trees. Okay. You can actually get the combination of like negative ions with like, they call them photon sides. Okay. And photon sides, which you get from the trees. Okay. They actually combine with the negative ions. Okay. And that's actually been shown to actually help to improve immunological parameters. Okay. And to actually help with things like secretory IgA, which is a key component of your innate immune response. Okay. It's an immunoglobulin, it's an antibody. Okay. So these types of things, okay, are going to, I mean, obviously I could bore people to tears with like all the biochemical interactions. Yeah. Okay. But these types of things are going to have like a big impact. Okay. And that's what I would generally say is quite low hanging fruit. Yeah. Okay. For example, I mean, if you're stressed, okay, and this is one example, okay, we know that's going to impact motility, like intestinal churning of the gut. Okay. It can actually decrease enzymatic output within the gut, like 20,000 fold. I mean, how are you going to go like breaking down food? Okay. And then if you've got a motility issue, okay, where you're struggling with like indigestible matter, high fermentable food, okay, the food's coming in, it's sitting there, it's fermenting, okay, and then that's going to encourage bacterial overgrowth, and that could lead to a motility issue or a gas exchange issue like SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, okay, which what we're seeing with something like SIBO, I can't give you the percentages, but that's just on the rise. Okay, because it definitely does have a link to, damage to the enteric nervous system, which is the nervous system that exists between your gut and your brain. Okay, where you actually impact like all these different types of neurons, like afferent neurons, efferent neurons, okay, interneurons, motor neurons. With motor neurons, you're talking about intestinal churning. Okay, I know that one of the major things that would actually compromise the enteric nervous system, and what's part of the enteric nervous system is the vagus nerve. Okay. So the vagus nerve is a cranial nerve. Okay. It's the longest cranial nerve in the body. It stretches from the cerebellum to the base of the abdomen. Okay. So it's part of the enteric nervous system, but it can operate separately away from the enteric nervous system. My point is, okay, that certain things that would compromise the enteric nervous system would just be childhood traumas, emotional stress, chronic stress, okay, negative emotions, okay, financial stress. So, I mean, there's a lot in this, okay, but I would say that just trying to initially, because obviously a lot of the things that I talk about, they sound very complex. And yes, if you have actually got to a point where the damage in the gut lining can be pretty severe, maybe sometimes some of those low hanging fruits will help. You'll feel better, but it might not fully rectify the actual damage that you've got taking place. Okay. If I can just give one example around that, okay, they, like I'm really big on at the moment, okay, I'm really big on restoring the natural defense mechanisms within the gut that would stop you from getting like candida and yeast and negative gram-bacteria overgrowth and SIBO in the first place. Okay, restoring the natural replenishment and rejuvenation processes, rapid renewal, tissue homeostasis within the gut lining. Like if you can restore these things, okay, they're going to do it for you. But the issue is if they're compromised, Now you've got problems. Yeah, okay. And so one of these natural defense mechanisms is called panel They're a type of epithelium. And so they're only located in the small intestine. They're very unique. Okay. And they actually secrete AMPs. They're called antimicrobial peptides. Okay. And some of these antimicrobial peptides are things like lysozyme. Okay. And that helps you to break down biofilm, helps to break down the bacterial cell wall. Okay. You got things like secreted phospholipase. Okay. You got human A defensin alpha 6. I know it's quite technical. Beta defensins. Okay. But if I use the example of human A defensin alpha 6, okay, that actually helps to prevent viral entry. So it actually stops you from getting like respiratory viruses like COVID. Okay. So can you imagine if you've got compromisation of the panel cells, what are you more prone to? Yeah. Okay. You're more prone to a lot of things. Yeah. Okay. And so they did testing around people who were eating a typical Western diet. Okay. Now this was like 40%, okay, of your nutritional outline coming from things like hydrogenated fats and trans fats and seed oils and vegetable oils and refined sugars and sugars. Okay. Only 40%. Okay. Now they actually found that compromised the panel cells. Okay. Where what they tried to do, there was a compromisation of the panel cells. Okay. Just to put it in perspective, when you've got a compromisation of the panel cells and you have a decrease in the AMPs, you're more prone to systemic diseases. So you're more prone to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, acute pancreatitis, like inflammation of the pancreas. Okay. Graft versus host disease. You're more prone to like an overburdening of the spleen. Okay. And within the lymphoid tissue in the spleen is actually where you produce like lymphocytes. Okay. That's also where you deal with like old red blood cells. Okay. And also we're talking about your ability to clear waste in and out of the cells as well. Okay. So, and even like overburdening of other organs as well. Yeah. Okay. So these individuals actually had compromised panel cells. Okay. Now what they tried to do to restore the compromisation of the panel cells, they tried to switch these individuals to a healthier nutritional outline. Now, I can't tell you all the ins and outs of what that healthier nutritional outline was, okay? But my point around this, okay, even when these individuals switched to a healthier nutritional outline, it was not enough to rectify the damage to the panel cells, okay? So people can do the right things. That's my point, yeah, okay? But they actually showed that the compromisation of the panel cells was potentially at a point of no return. Now, do I agree with that? No. Okay.
Could this be any age, or is this like 50s plus population?
Well, think about it, okay. We're talking about like people being on a typical Western diet, okay, for 20, 30 years. Okay. So you would say that these individuals, okay, are going to be, you know, most likely in their 40s and their 50s. Yeah. Okay. So they're going to be a little bit older. Okay. So switching to a healthy nutritional outline, once again, we could probably pick holes in the healthier nutritional outline potentially. Yeah. Okay. But my point is, okay, that was just trying to switch to a healthier nutritional outline. Okay. Was not enough to repair the damage. Okay. And in that instance, my point is that you might need a little bit more assistance. Yeah. Okay. And so what people don't realize, okay, there are things that can speed up the process. And we do live in an era, and we're very lucky to live in an era, okay, where there are certain compounds that can fast track that process. So to put it in perspective as well, okay, we know if you're exposed to things like mycotoxins, like mold, okay, if you're exposed like mycotoxins in food, like there's one called DON, which is called deoxynivalenol, okay, that's actually been shown to compromise panel cells. If you've got like sleep deprivation, short sleep time frames, that's been shown to compromise panel cells. To put it in perspective, someone's got celiac disease, their panel cells just don't work. Okay, now if that's your natural defense mechanism, how are you going to go with Candida and yeast? How are you going to go with like negative gram bacteria? How are you going to go with SIBO? That's why you're more prone to those things. That makes sense? Yeah. Okay.
So that's why one autoimmune condition starts turning into many conditions.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an example. Okay. They created like panel cell deficient mice. Now, if we look at hierarchy of research, they've always got to start with animal studies, because there's always going to be like people listen to the podcast and they go, well, he's talking about mice studies and rat studies. Okay. But it doesn't mean it's not valid. Okay. Yes, top of the hierarchy is going to be human trials and human studies. Okay. But most of the time, they can't start off by doing that research on humans. That makes sense? Yeah. Okay. So they created a scenario where they created panel cell deficient mice to actually to actually see what would happen. Okay. And they actually showed that these mice were more prone to Klebsiella pneumonia infection, which is like negative gram bacteria. So we are talking about LPS here. Okay. Now, to put in perspective, okay, Klebsiella pneumonia infection has been linked to things like UTIs, urinary tract infections, pneumonia, meningitis. Okay. It's also linked to like cold and flu-like symptoms, sinus pain behind the eyes. Okay. And then all the complications that you actually get from LPS. Okay. But it's also linked to molecular mimicry or molecular mimics. Okay. And this is basically where the bacteria have like surface proteins, and even like the toxins and endotoxins that are released, okay, have a similar cell structure to cells and proteins in the body. Okay. And that could be cells and proteins within the gastrointestinal tract. And it becomes a case of mistaken identity, where your own immune system ends up attacking like cells and proteins within areas like the gastrointestinal tract, and you damage particular structures. Okay. And so we know that repeated Klebsiella pneumonia infection, okay, can be linked to ankylosing spondylitis, which is an autoimmune condition. Okay, which is where you actually almost get a bit of a fusing of the intervertebral disc and the disc within the spine. Okay, and that would actually show up with like cervical issues. Okay, where you got tight upper trap and tight in the neck. Okay, and so my thing is, and this is not me telling people don't move. Okay, but then people think they've got a biomechanical issue. Okay, but you've actually got a biochemical issue.
Yeah,
Still
because when you
move,
said
do
that
these things.
first,
That makes
I was
sense.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, when you said that, I was like, I'm pretty sure that's a spinal issue. But then that's so what you're saying is that's the symptom, but the actual underlying issue is biochemical.
Yeah, well, they've actually shown that like when you actually look at it, okay, there's a thing called HLA B27. People can look it up, okay, and you can get that from like different types of like negative gram bacteria strains, okay, Klebsiella being one of them, yeah, okay, but even like chlamydia, okay, and that has a link to ankylosing spondylitis, okay, like even Klebsiella can have a link to things like rheumatoid arthritis, okay, fibromyalgia, arthritis, osteoarthritis, yeah, okay. Now, once again, okay, it's not me telling people don't move. Okay, move. Okay, we need synovial fluid, we need hyaluronic acid. Okay, but sometimes, okay, if you're doing those things and you're doing them well, okay, and you've been doing it for an extended period of time, it's not getting better. Guess what? There's a good chance it's not a biomechanical issue. Okay, and it's a biochemical issue, and you're probably going to have to address, okay, what's obviously going on within the gastrointestinal tract. Another example is like, sorry to bombard you with all this information, yeah, okay, but
I think we're gonna have to do a round two, man.
but another example, a lot of people deal with issues with candida and yeast, yeah, okay, and I want to make it clear, candida and yeast is not the devil. It's not the devil, okay? It's part of a normal ecology, okay? Guess what? It's commensal on the skin. You've got like 80 different strains on the skin, okay? It's commensal within the sinus passages, in the nasal secretions, okay? So it, when you've actually got more commensal forms of like Candida albicans and Candida strains, okay? Commensal forms of Candida albicans can actually help with like your immune system, nutrient assimilation, nutrient absorption, okay? So the way it works, you've got about 150 different strains of Candida and yeast, okay? So you've got two major groups. So one is the commensal forms, which actually have benefits, okay? And then you've got the more virulent forms, and the more virulent forms have been linked to like systemic diseases, like non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, okay? Systemic diseases like cancer, okay? So now there's a modulation process. Now, most people are going to say that modulation process is coming from things like probiotics, and it might be Lactobacillus acidophilus, okay? I'm not saying these things don't play a role, okay? But once again, if we go back to the panicels, okay, they basically, okay, express, okay, it's called the PYY peptide or peptide YY. Now, people think it's like a peptide, but it's really like a hormone. It's made up of 36 amino acids, okay? It does actually play a key role in aspects around satiety, okay? So you like feeling full, okay? It actually showed that mice that were lacking the PYY peptide were more prone to obesity, okay? That's not the point I want to get across. Okay, the point I want to get across, okay, is the PYY peptide actually helps to modulate and regulate candida and yeast. So it's selectively antifungal. That's its job. So it stops the commensal forms of like Candida albicans and Candida strains from turning into their more virulent forms. That's its job. Okay, now once again, if I've got compromisation of the panicels because I'm using NSAIDs, okay, anti-inflammatories, if I'm using
okay.
like anti-inflammatories, okay, antibiotics, okay, if I'm doing things to compromise the panicels, okay, we know that sometimes, and this is not me saying it's bad, okay, but we know that if you're doing things like 2-day water fast, 3-day water fast, okay, you have more dysbiosis. Okay, we know they did starvation models in mice. Okay, and that was 48 hours of fasting. Okay, and that was actually shown to create defective panna cells, where lysozyme, which is an AMP, antimicrobial peptide, production went down. Okay, these mice were more prone to inflammation in the ileum, which is the bottom section of the small intestine. They were more prone to Crohn's in the ileum, which is an IBD condition. Okay, and also it compromised the ileocecal valve. And the ileocecal valve is the valve that controls the contents of the food coming from the ileum to the colon. Okay, so then you can be more prone to what? SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Okay, now is that me saying that doing a 2-day water fast and a 3-day water fast is bad? No, but it might be, okay, if you have more dysbiosis and you have more co-infection and you have more bacterial complications. Okay, that's my point. Yeah, okay, and so for me, okay, we can take, like, if you look up what is the body's natural defense mechanism to keep in check, like yeast and candida, go like Dr. Google, Wikipedia, okay, what's probably going to come up? Antifungals, like nystatin, okay, it might be natural antifungals, like monolaurin, colloidal silver, maybe grapefruit seed extract, okay, it might be caprylic acid. Now, do we think naturally that the body was dependent on an external factor to do that job for you?
No.
There's no chance. There is no chance, okay? My point is, if the natural defense mechanism is down, the door is ajar, the door is wide open for opportunistic bacteria, because candida and yeast is a secondary infection. It's opportunistic. If it's got nothing to keep it in check, it's going to proliferate, okay? And then you're going to get all the issues with the candida and the yeast. It's going to release all these, it can release up to 80 different toxins in your system. And some of those things are like ethanol, acetaldehyde, okay? And the major symptoms are mainly going to be neurological.
That's a rabbit hole I want to go down. We don't have time today, but I'd love to actually talk to you about this in detail, the impact on mental health with all this stuff. I think that would be a good podcast to actually just literally cover that as one
Well,
topic.
I'm sure we could talk for, 8 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. Mate, I'm conscious of your time. So one question I want to finish with is, what have you changed your mind on recently? And by recently, let's say the last 2 years.
Well, one thing I want to say around that, okay, I've changed my mind on a lot. And that's probably one of the biggest points that I would love to get out to people, Connor, okay, is that I want to be challenged. I want to be proven wrong, okay, and I want to constantly evolve, okay. So I think I sort of almost gave one example there, okay. So one example would be, a lot of people preach like calorie deficit, it's all about calorie deficit, okay, and people say, like, you want to help with the gut lining, do a calorie deficit. Now, do I think those people that are preaching a calorie deficit truly understand why a calorie deficit would be beneficial for the gut lining? I think they have no idea, zero idea, okay? But I've done research around that, and if someone's got more dysbiosis, okay, if they've got like a lot of co-infection, a lot of stuff that I was talking about, you know what? A calorie deficit for them would be more beneficial than them doing a 2-day water fast or a 3-day water fast. That's not me saying, for people who love fasting, it's not me saying that it's not beneficial. I'm just talking about in that circumstance, because a calorie deficit, okay, can actually help with the thing called cyclic ADP ribose, okay, which actually, I know it's quite complex, okay, but it actually helps with self-renewal of intestinal stem cells. Now, one intestinal stem cell will repair an entire patch of the epithelial lining within 7 days. So we're talking about rapid renewal of the gut lining. So my point would be, yeah, okay, within reason, not dropping down into probably a 60% deficit. Yeah, okay. But in that particular circumstance, for that individual, that's going to be a little bit more beneficial. Okay. And even like another example I could give, okay, it's just maybe sleep. Okay. Like, I've changed my perception around what is probably going to be some of the best approaches to rectifying sleep, because I think a lot of time our approach to sleep is, I'm not sleeping very well, so let's use some sort of compound. It's almost like the testosterone analogy that I gave, Okay. Where it's like, I'm not sleeping very well. Just give me something to knock me out. Okay. Well, the interesting thing here is that I've changed my approach with this, where what I'm trying to do a lot of the time is to restore particular structures within the brain that actually help to promote sleep. Okay. So for example, okay, have you ever heard of myelin before?
Myelin, yeah.
So, yeah, so you got
What can you
like
explain?
myelin sheath. So you got myelin sheath
Mm.
in the brain, you got myelin sheath behind the optic nerves in the retina. Okay, you got myelin sheath within the spine. So for example, someone's got MS, that is a demyelinating disease. Okay, and that's why they've got blurred vision, they've got gait issues, they've got spatial awareness issues. Okay, they feel a bit weak in the legs. Okay, they've got cognitive issues. Okay, now you can have damage to myelin, and one of the worst things to damage myelin is inflammation. Okay. And I would say the biggest contributor to inflammation is generally going to come from bacteria, especially things like negative gram bacteria and LPS. Okay. So my approach now has been to, so for example, okay, that there's evidence to show that if someone has like what's called primary deficits in myelin, okay, so we're talking about like damage to myelin, compromisation of the myelin, okay, that can actually lead to sleep and circadian rhythm disorders. But ironically, okay, if you have chronic sleep loss, okay, that may negatively affect myelin.
Mm-hmm.
And it's another loop, okay, where now my approach is, okay, what can I use that helps with remyelination, but also helps with REM sleep, non REM sleep, which is like slow wave sleep, okay? And there's certain compounds that do that, like black cumin, which is black seed oil, okay, taurine, which is an amino acid, okay? But magnolia bark is really interesting around that as well, which actually helps to increase DHEA by 227%. Okay, now if I say those compounds, most people are not going to associate those compounds with helping to promote better sleep. And I guess my point is, okay, what we know now is probably not going to be the remedies of what is going to correct things in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. It's and do you think like even on the point on sleep, do you still also look at like I just think the technology is such a massive thing
For
for
sure, for sure. I mean, there's
sleep.
no disputing that. No disputing
Yeah.
that. Okay. Even around the testosterone, okay, a lot of time with clients, okay, I would use, that's why I'm big on something like, I know it's more supplements, okay, but it's interesting. Okay. There's a thing called spermidine that you actually get from like wheat germ. Now, everyone talks about Tonkat Ali, Tonkat Ali, Tonkat Ali, yeah, okay. But spermidine is really interesting because they did like research where 2.5 milligrams per kilo of body weight actually helped to protect the testes from EMF damage, which is one of the worst things for the testicles, testicular function. Yeah. Okay. So, yes. Okay. Anything that is going to protect around like EMF exposure. Okay. The reason I don't really tend to talk about that so much when it comes to sleep, okay, is because I think it's almost like a no-brainer, Connor. Maybe
You
not to everyone, not to
you
everybody.
you would be surprised, man.
Okay. But you know what's really interesting, like with sleep as well? I think more people need to focus, like, one thing that can definitely create issues around insomnia and poor sleeping patterns can be very, very high heat temperatures.
Mm.
And looking at things to actually lower, okay, like your core temperature to actually help to promote sleep. Okay. Now I tend to look at supplements. It doesn't always have to be supplements. Okay. But something like glycine, which is an amino acid, can actually lower your internal core temperature to actually help with sleep. Okay. And I think that's something, so we could talk about like blue light and all that type of stuff. I think more people are talking about that. Okay. But how many people are talking about like high heat temperatures having such a negative impact on your sleeping patterns? There's no doubt it does. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, of course. Okay. Like, people talk about like creating a bit of a back cave. I don't know how I feel about that one sometimes. Yeah. Okay. I think it might have some benefits, but there might be, I think when we're tribal, sometimes we might have slept under the stars. Okay. You would have got the light from the moon. So I'm not sure about that one. Okay.
Mhm.
But I think, yeah, low hanging fruit would be, minimize EMF exposure. Okay. Lower your maybe your core temperature to help to promote sleep. Yeah. Okay. Maybe have a bit of a cooler room. Yeah. Okay. I know it seems simple. Yeah. Okay. But it has a huge impact.
Yeah, man. And it's just the simple stuff I see again and again. Like it's quite funny. I'll just leave you with this one just so you're aware. Like I've gotten a few messages from people, especially as the following has grown over the last like 12 months, people saying, "Can you stop sending me messages in the middle of the night?" Like I might send an email or something. And I'm like, I can't control your notifications. Like, what? First of all, first of all, why are they on? Secondly, why is it in your bedroom and waking you up? So when I started getting numerous messages like that, I was like, oh yeah, like technology is a huge problem for a lot of people, and that will solve a lot
For
of things. So
sure. I mean, I don't want people to like, obviously, I feel like there might be some people who listen to this podcast and they're like completely overwhelmed. I'm a bit of an
totally.
over, I can definitely overwhelm people, as you know. Yeah. Okay. But I don't want people to be overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Okay. That like always start with the low hanging fruit. Okay. If you start with the low hanging fruit, okay, and it of course, it's going to have some benefits, but it's not really correcting like all the issues that you've got going on at that time. Okay. Then you might want to look underneath the hood a little bit more.
Yep.
And that might be some of the things that I've actually brought up, during this podcast.
Yeah. Awesome, mate. So where can people learn more about what you do, and also like for who would benefit a lot from working with you? Like what type of people tend to do really well getting help from you with the blood work and the supplementation?
I would generally say the individuals that come to me, okay, I'm almost like the last hurrah.
Yeah.
They've generally tried everything else. It hasn't really worked for them. And they need to really understand, okay, like the missing pieces that have not been looked at. And so, yes, I'm getting a lot of people with very complex health issues. But on top of that, I deal with people who just want to optimize their health. Okay, they almost want to put the cherry on top of the cake. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm dealing with a lot of athletes. Okay, who want to optimize their health. Okay, I would say it's a bit of a mixed bag, Connor.
Yeah.
And people are interested in the message that I'm putting out, which I'm just extremely grateful for anybody taking time out of their day to you know to you know to read that information and to engage in the content that I'm putting out. I mean, obviously Instagram. Okay, I'm on Instagram, and so that's Dave.O. Brien. Okay, that's my Instagram handle. People can look at my website as well. Okay, I don't know maybe in the notes you can actually put
Yeah. I'll
you
link
know
all this
you
stuff,
know
man.
yeah, link it all for them. Okay.
Yeah.
But that probably would be the major. I've got a podcast as well. I forgot to mention. Okay, with one of my colleagues, with Jake
Great.
Doshel,
Oh, cool.
and that's called A Gut Feeling. Okay, so
Awesome.
yeah, that's probably the best places to look out for a lot of the work that I'm putting out.
Awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate you jumping on, mate, and very, very good to reconnect after quite some time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's been a real honor.
Awesome, man.